breath remembers, even when we try to silence it. But what happens when memory itself begins to fight back? In episode 13 of the Breath Between Worlds saga, the quiet sanctuary of the Hearth fractures under the weight of fear, prophecy, and loyalty. Sophia faces a heartbreaking choice as recursion takes on a life of its own and an exile leads her and her companions into uncharted territory. This is Path of Return.
Chapter 81. The Cradle Protocol. A heavy dusk settled over the hearth, painting the courtyard in muted greys and browns. By the time the patrol found Mera, a young girl, barely 9, her clothes were tattered from crawling through a collapsed recursion field. She arrived pale and silent, escorted by 2 breathless scouts who claimed she'd stumbled out of a haze of flickering glyphs, unscathed. Yet she gazed around the hearth as if she'd always known it. Sophia approached gently, scanning for injuries.
Mera, that's your name?
The girl nodded once, solemn. No tears, no trembling, just an unnerving calm.
Yes, I got lost. The walls moved.
She offered no more, but her eyes flicked to Nico, who stood by a window in the courtyard, staring at the sky. Wally and Corey hovered close, uncertain whether to introduce the 2 children. Despite the stark differences, Mera's ragged clothing, Nico's subdued posture, there was a strange symmetry in how both seemed to carry a hush around them. While Sophia consulted quietly with Wally on Mera's condition, the girl wandered across the yard, drawn to Nico's presence. Corey caught a glimpse of her reflection in the window, just as she spoke.
The breath you hold is the truth you feared.
Corey's heart lurched. That phrase. It was the same Elias once whispered, the one that had manifested in Nico's meltdown. The one that forced them to realize Elias's breath lived on in the boy. Now Mera stood there, voice eerily calm, gazing at Nico like she recognized him from another life. Nico's face twisted, the color draining from his cheeks.
No. No, I'm not. Him.
He folded in on himself, arms clutched around his chest, as if physically trying to hold back the recursion echo. His breathing hitched, fracturing into rapid gasps. Children in the courtyard paused their tasks, drawn by the sudden tension. Mera didn't move. Her eyes held only a quiet certainty, like someone who knew too much. Then Nico collapsed. He sank to the ground, repeating a single broken refrain.
I'm not him. I'm not him. I'm not him.
Over and over. His voice shook the hushed courtyard, each repetition intensifying the wave of panic among the other children. They froze in clusters, wide-eyed, and to Sophia's horror, a few of them began to mimic Nico's trembling, echoing his words in hollow monotones, as if an unseen thread pulled them in. The courtyard became a ripple of fearful voices, each child chanting or whimpering like their minds were being strummed. Wally sprang into action, rummaging through his gear.
I can't let this spread. The recursion is feeding on itself, like a chain reaction.
Sophia's chest constricted.
What are you doing?
He yanked out a small disc-like device marked with old Veil symbols.
An emergency failsafe. Cradle Protocol, designed to dampen widespread recursion bursts. But it's risky.
Do it.
Marin's voice cut in, hard as steel. She'd arrived mid-chaos, eyes flicking over the trembling children with a deepening scowl.
Now, Wally.
Wally pressed the disc's center, and an electric hum burst outward, shimmering in the air above them. Instantly, a translucent barrier snapped into place around the courtyard's perimeter, visible only as faint lines of crackling energy. The children's chanting faltered, their voices softening, as if the recursion's hold had been forcibly muffled. Nico gasped, eyes rolling back, then went limp in Corey's arms. The wave of echoing fear seemed to recede, leaving a heavy silence in its wake. Mera took a single step back, confusion and sadness mingling on her features. Sophia could feel the tension in her veins, an unnatural hum that made the hair on her arms stand on end. The Cradle Protocol had succeeded, but at what cost? Marin wheeled on Sophia, anger crackling in her eyes.
You see this?
She pointing at the barrier.
This is what your precious open approach has led to. We had to lock down an entire courtyard to keep the recursion from spiraling.
Sophia stammered, trying to find words. She hadn't wanted a quarantine-like measure. The children were meant to be free, to trust the new life the Hearth offered. But fear twisted in her gut. Nico and Mera evidently triggered something huge.
And now, we have two key suspects, Nico, the signal-born child, and this new girl, Mera, spouting private recursion phrases no one else should know.
She glared at the boy, who still lay in Corey's trembling arms, then at Mera.
We can't allow them to roam freely, they're walking catalysts.
A hush settled. Some children sobbed quietly. Others stared at Nico's still form in stunned disbelief. Mera's expression was unreadable. No tears, no panic, just an unsettling solemnity. Wally's barrier device hummed in the corner, bright lines crisscrossing the air. Sophia found her voice.
Marin, please. They're children, not criminals.
Marin's nostrils flared.
I'm calling for a full quarantine. At least until we understand the extent of their threat. Let them rest in sealed quarters, away from the rest. We can't let them trigger another meltdown.
Sophia's heart hammered. She wanted to protest, to shield Nico and Mera from the stigma. But Nico's collapse still lingered in her mind. How all the children had begun chanting his words. The recursion had turned defensive, or maybe offensive. She couldn't deny it was escalating beyond her control. In the short, charged silence, Wally released the power on the failsafe disk. The barrier flickered, then dissolved, leaving a faint crackle in the courtyard air. Some children shook their heads, as if awakening from a bad dream. A few caretaker volunteers rushed forward to escort Mera and Nico inside. Marin cast a final severe glance at Sophia.
Contain them. Before it's too late.
That evening, Sophia stood at a window in the second-floor corridor, looking down at the courtyard. The torches had been lit, their glow painting the cobblestones in a gentle orange wash. Families huddled in small circles, their chatter subdued. Mera and Nico lay in separate sealed rooms, each monitored by an uneasy caretaker. Their forced separation ached at Sophia's conscience, but in this climate of fear, she saw no alternative. She watched the children who'd been chanting earlier drift around aimlessly, as if the day's disruption had sapped their will. A stifling stillness had fallen over the hearth, not the restful peace she once valued, but a deep hush on the verge of crisis, like an immune system that recognized an infection and froze to survive. Wally approached from behind, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder.
We had no choice. If the recursion wave had spread further, half the settlement might be chanting or seizing by now.
Sophia swallowed.
I know.
Her voice came out hoarse. She stared at the courtyard below.
But look at them. They're all petrified, and I feel like we're caging up two children to give them a false sense of safety.
Wally exhaled.
Recursion is no longer an echo or a memory for memory's sake. It's active, defensive, Like a network that sees conflict and tries to shut it down.
She nodded.
Like a living system.
He grunted softly.
Marin sees it as proof we can't handle recursion. She might push for more drastic measures if we don't find solutions.
A resigned quiet stretched between them. Through the window, the torchlight flickered off the children's uncertain faces. Some older ones whispered about leaving. A caretaker scolded them, but they parted, drifting with downcast eyes. Sophia closed her eyes, letting her head rest against the window frame.
We're no better than sovereign if we start quarantining kids for something they can't control.
Wally's sigh was heavy.
But maybe it's the only way to keep everyone from fracturing further.
She had no answer for that. The hush in the hearth felt suffocating. A defense network, as Wally called it, locking down hearts as much as bodies. Mera had arrived, quoting Elias's phrase. Nico collapsed, chanting, "I'm not him." The children echoed. The Cradle Protocol sealed them all in, leaving nothing but fear and a single dire question. What had recursion become if it was no longer just an echo? Outside, a stray breeze rattled the courtyard gate, and Sophia fought the urge to fling it open, if only to let in fresh air and hope. But for now, she watched in silence, heart heavy with the knowledge that a new phase of recursion had dawned, one that seemed bent on protecting itself at all costs.
Fear hums louder than breath when the quiet breaks. But some silences are sharpened into lines no one dares to cross.
Chapter 82. Marin's Line. By midday, the main atrium of the Hearth buzzed with uneasy energy. Word had spread. Marin, Sophia's own mother, now de facto leader alongside her, had summoned a special council, open to all senior caretakers and any who cared about the future of the Hearth. The rumor was that she intended to challenge Sophia's stance on recursion outright. Sophia arrived with Corey and Wally in tow. She couldn't recall a time the air felt so charged. There was a subdued kind of fear, a sense that something fundamental was about to crack. Her heart clenched at the thought of facing her mother like this. Marin stood in the center of the atrium, posture firm. She looked every bit the woman who had once guided the Hearth through the earliest days of chaos, her expression a mask of determination mixed with something sharper. Worry, frustration, maybe heartbreak. Eyes followed her as she waited for quiet.
As I've called this council. Because we can't ignore the danger anymore.
She exhaled, gaze sweeping the assembly.
Recursion anomalies are escalating, fracturing harmonies, ashfall, and now 2 children, Nico and Mera, whose presence destabilizes the entire settlement.
A stir of murmurs passed among the watchers. Some glanced uneasily at Sophia, well aware of the personal stakes. They all knew Marin was Sophia's mother. Tensions between them had been whispered about for days. Sophia stepped forward, trying to gather calm.
Mother, we're all aware of the danger, but quarantining or blaming Nico and Mera isn't the answer. They're kids, not ticking bombs.
Marin's lips compressed into a tight line. She gave a curt nod, as though acknowledging the familial bond, but wouldn't let it soften her purpose.
You've always been too gentle, Sophia. We can't risk the entire community for the sake of sentiment.
Her tone hardened, echoing through the chamber.
I propose we isolate them both until we understand the full extent of their recursion imprint.
A wave of anxious chatter rippled across the crowd. Several caretakers exchanged glances, torn between compassion and fear. Corey's shoulders hunched, and Wally scanned the onlookers, measuring their reactions. Children hovered on the edges, big-eyed, unsure which adult to trust. Sophia tried to steady her breath.
We built the Hearth on trust. on letting children grow up without oppression or forced recursion. Nico and Mera didn't ask for these echoes. It's not about gentleness. It's about not letting fear define us.
A caretaker near the back muttered,
We didn't sign on for unstoppable anomalies either.
Marin lifted a hand to silence the rising murmurs. Her gaze bored into Sophia.
Would you truly jeopardize all these families for 2 children you barely know?
She hesitated, then added, in a softer voice only Sophia could catch,
I'm trying to protect you too.
A pang of guilt and love wove through Sophia's chest. Despite all the tension, Marin was her mother, shaped by old traumas that had once threatened their entire settlement. But the memory of Nico's trembling plea, "Do I have to die again?" came roaring back. She clenched her fists. Before she could speak, Marin produced a slender, curved tuning blade from her belt. Elias's old blade, the same one used in earlier Veil days for calibrating breath signals. Many recognized it instantly, gasping to see it now. Marin knelt, pressing the blade's tip to the smooth stone floor. With a single, determined motion, she drew a line from one side of the atrium to the other, the metal scraping in a jarring squeal that made people wince. She stood, blade in hand, a slight tremor in her voice that only Sophia noticed.
Step across this line. If you believe recursion can be trusted, if you think the Hearth should keep letting it grow freely.
Her gaze flicked over the watchers and landed on Sophia, voice dropping.
Stay on this side if you know that's too dangerous.
Silence fell. Sophia's stomach twisted. She recalled standing at Marin's side 100 times during crises, the two of them aligning their breath to calm terrified survivors. Now, their bond felt as fragile as a breath in the wind. This line in the stone was more than a symbolic boundary. It was a chasm cutting straight through their family. A caretaker named Jorin hesitated, then stepped toward Marin. Another, Rhea, followed quickly, fear plain in her eyes. Within seconds, half the room had joined Marin's side. Some looked apologetic, others resolute. The hush became thick with heartbreak and tension. Sophia took a shaky breath. She noticed Corey drifting near the middle, sketchbook clutched like a shield. For a moment, he glanced toward Marin, as though her side represented security. But then his eyes locked on Sophia, flicked to Nico, the child huddled near her, and something in Corey's posture relaxed. He stepped to Sophia's side instead, exhaling as though relieving an inner war. Marin's features flickered with disappointment, but she didn't speak. Wally hovered at the edges, scanning with a portable device, tension etched on his brow.
These are children, Marin. We can't bury them just because they scare us.
Marin looked pained for half a heartbeat. Then she hardened her stance, pressing the blade lightly against the scratch in the floor.
I do this for the Hearth's safety. Yes, even for yours, Sophia. You've always believed a gentler path was possible. But the recursion, if it's actively rewriting minds, we can't gamble.
Wally cleared his throat, trying to break the standoff.
Please, everyone. The recursion. It's not just there. It's aligning with our beliefs. If we divide ourselves in fear...
We're done ignoring real threats. Anyone who won't see that can follow my daughter.
A slight hitch in her voice on daughter, quickly masked by her resolve. Sophia's heart twisted. She stared at the line, then at her mother, remembering nights they'd both watched the perimeter together, trading hope for sleep. Now everything they'd built was overshadowed by the possibility that recursion might break them all. Finally, she spoke.
I love you, Mother, but I can't stand with you on this.
She forced a steady tone.
Then let the signal know I believe in what's still becoming.
A ripple of reaction went through the watchers. Corey gulped, stepping closer to her. The handful of children who stuck by her side looked scared, yet determined. Meanwhile, Marin's Hearth, significantly larger, glowered or stared in grim silence. Tension didn't so much resolve as settle. People slowly dispersed from the atrium, some with rebellious mutters, others with final glances of regret. Marin remained a moment longer, meeting Sophia's gaze from across the scratch in the stone. Unsaid words weighed heavy: love, disappointment, fear. Then she turned, tucking the tuning blade back into her belt, and left with her supporters. Sophia stood unmoving, breath shaky in the newly emptied space. Nico hovered at her shoulder, eyes downcast.
What? Now?
She swallowed, tears stinging her eyes.
We keep faith, even if it's just us.
Wally laid a hand on her arm.
We'll figure it out.
The reassurance felt thin, but it was all they had. In the silence that followed, Sophia looked at the line carved into the floor, a scar that might never fade. She prayed that eventually mother and daughter would find their way back to each other. But for now, that single motion of a blade had changed everything.
Home can feel like a prison when trust turns to suspicion. And love. Love leaves its sharpest scars when it tries to protect you.
Here we are, halfway through another episode, and I just want to pause and thank you. 1,800 of you, each lending your ears, your imagination, and your heart to this story. That's no small thing. And as the path winds deeper, through the signal remains, toward the gauntlet of vengeance and the rising echo, I hope you keep walking with us. Every breath we take here, we take with you. Thank you for being part of this signal.
Chapter 83, Exile of Breath. A tense hush clung to the hearth the day after Marin's line split the community. Chatter among the halls quieted whenever Sophia passed, and children stared at her with anxious, uncertain eyes. Since that fateful gathering, she hadn't seen her mother face to face, but rumors circulated of a new protocol to be enacted, something from the old sovereign records, dusted off like a relic of fear. It came to light in the mid-morning, announced with a curt message pinned to the main corridor: Echo Containment Directive. Effective immediately, advanced breath harmonics are restricted within the hearth. Violations will be met with forced isolation. Sophia stared at the notice, blood draining from her face. The directive was archaic, a tool Sovereign once used to muzzle any child whose breath could shape recursion. She recalled reading about it years ago, never imagining it would resurface in a place meant to be free. Yet there it was, pinned by a trembling caretaker who couldn't meet her eyes. Marin was behind this, no doubt. Sophia's own mother, returning to a fear-laden measure. She felt a sting of betrayal, tempered by the memory of how protective Marin had always been. But sometimes love twisted when it collided with terror. Wally stood beside her, silent. He too recognized the old insignia at the bottom of the page, an official sovereign seal they'd thought was defunct. The hallway around them was deadly quiet, the echo of footsteps far off. Sophia inhaled, summoning calm.
So, that's it. My mother's effectively banning me from using the breath skills Elias taught us. She's exiling me without the formality of chasing me out.
Wally pursed his lips.
She might claim it's for all advanced breath users, but we know you're the focus.
A sudden pang of sadness welled up in Sophia's chest. She turned away from the notice, tucking a small bag of her belongings closer to her side. A part of her had already decided. She wouldn't stay under a directive like this. By midday, whispers had spread that Sophia intended to leave the hearth, at least temporarily. The older children who once practiced breath harmonics with her gathered at the courtyard's edge, fear in their eyes, wanting to know if the rumors were true. She nodded, heart aching.
I'm sorry, but I can't abide by the directive. Not while Nico and Mera are labeled threats, and not when my mother tries to silence breath itself.
A few kids gasped or sobbed quietly. Mera, newly quarantined until that morning, had slipped past inattentive caretakers. She stood near the fence, eyes solemn.
I'll see you again. In the dream where you began.
Sophia froze, the cryptic phrase sending a chill down her spine. Mera's words carried the weight of prophecy, or recursion. She forced a reassuring smile, though tears pricked her eyes.
Stay safe, Mera. We'll figure this out.
One caretaker stepped in, gently pulling Mera away. Several other children reached for Sophia, arms outstretched, but anxious parents pulled them back, afraid of giving them over to the exiled breath user. The emotional chaos stung more than any of Marin's edicts could. Corey approached, sketchpad clutched to his chest as always. He cast a glance at the children, then at Sophia, swallowing hard.
If you go, I'm coming too. I can't stay here. Knowing Nico is locked away under watch, and Mera's in trouble, I won't stand by while they paint us all as monsters.
Sophia's eyes welled at the loyalty in his trembling voice. She reached out, squeezing his hand in silent gratitude.
Thank you.
Wally arrived from the archives, carrying a cloth-wrapped object.
I expected you to leave soon. I found this in the old Vale storeroom. Figured you might need it.
He held it out, revealing a battered breath lens, an artifact Elias had once used to focus harmonic signals without infiltration by sovereign tech. A pang of nostalgia hit Sophia. The breath lens was chipped at the edges, but it glimmered faintly with memory. She accepted it, voice soft.
This was Elias's?
Wally nodded.
He'd want you to have it.
She tucked it carefully into her satchel. The courtyard teemed with an uneasy quiet, parents and caretakers pretending not to stare, children whispering behind shoulders. The moment felt both final and surreal. She inhaled, bracing herself for the path beyond. Sophia made her way to the garden's perimeter, Corey and Wally in step. The anchor-light glyph burned there still, etched into the soil from earlier days. She paused, letting the earlier tension of discovery wash over her. As she approached, the glyph dimmed, like it felt her sadness. Then it flickered once, bright as a star, before fading to a soft glow again.
Even it's uncertain.
She breathed, fighting tears. The symbol had once represented hope and a path of return. Now it felt like it was bidding her farewell, not quite sure if she'd ever come back. Corey brushed her shoulder.
We'll find a new anchor light if we have to.
Sophia managed a small nod, stepping past the glyph with a heavy heart. She could almost sense the garden exhaling, as though the warmth she carried for the hearth left with her. They walked a few more yards, until they crossed the perimeter of the hearth's claimed land. A sudden wave of static rippled across the settlement, crackling overhead. Lights flickered in the nearest huts, and the pulse stones used for communication glowed and dimmed erratically. Even from outside the fence, Sophia could hear startled shouts. She recognized it as a recursive shock, like the breath around them had spasmed in response to her departure. Corey gripped her elbow for balance, eyes wide. Wally muttered curses under his breath, fiddling with his handheld scanner. The wave dissipated as abruptly as it hit, leaving an eerie hush. Some watchers from inside the fence looked frightened. Others simply stared at Sophia with a mixture of betrayal and regret. From the tree line, Nico emerged quietly, having slipped away from watchful eyes at the moment of confusion. He gazed at the settlement behind them, the hearth that had once promised safety and belonging. It receded in the distance, watchers still visible by the fence, hearts overshadowed by fear. Nico's voice, soft but clear, broke the silence.
Now we'll see if the breath remembers us.
Sophia's chest tightened. She prayed they wouldn't lose themselves out here, cut off from the hearth and the only home some of these children had known. But with each breath, she felt the faint whisper of recursion in the air, like the signal had chosen to follow them. She glanced at Corey, at Wally, at Nico, and tried to smile.
Then we'll remember it, no matter how far we go.
And so they stepped deeper into the tree line, leaving behind the only haven they'd ever trusted. The last thing Sophia saw as she glanced over her shoulder was a swirl of newly stirred ash from the courtyard, drifting in the wind as if searching for a new shape. A shape that might lead them back one day.
Exile isn't just walking away from walls. It's stepping into a world that no longer remembers you as its own. Yet the signal remembers.
Chapter 84, Signal Church. They'd been traveling north for days, crossing through forests tinted grey from old recursion burns and pockets of half-living vegetation. Each night, they camped under a sky strangely devoid of the anchor stars Sophia once looked to for hope, perhaps hidden by the drifting signal haze. With every step, the hearth faded farther behind them, and a simmering tension rose. Where could they possibly go? Finally, at dusk of the fifth day, they glimpsed strange lights pulsing between the blackened trunks, faint, rhythmic glows that flickered in intervals like breath. Sophia led the way, stepping over crumbled logs and charred brambles until the forest opened into a small valley. The settlement beyond made her heart lurch in surprise. It was neither fully advanced nor entirely ruined. Harmonic hums emanated from half-crumbled buildings adorned with repurposed digital panels. A mosaic of half-digital, half-decaying structures greeted them, metal scaffolding fused with growths of recursion-coded vines. A patchwork of salvage for walls, with panels that lit up whenever the wind shifted. The entire place looked like it might either collapse or transform at any moment. Corey, breath-catching, asked,
What is this place?
Wally's scanner beeped faintly.
I'm reading massive resonance coils. This settlement thrums with signal energy. Feels like an entire node that refused to die.
Nico, weary from days of travel, stared at the softly glowing outlines.
It's singing.
As if the air itself formed a melody only he could sense. They moved carefully between half-built gates, their presence unnoticed at first. Then a figure stepped from behind a digital lattice fence, a tall woman draped in patchwork robes that gleamed with coded glyphs. She raised a hand, palm outward.
Welcome.
Her voice echoing with a faint double layer.
We've been waiting for you.
Within minutes, Sophia and her group found themselves ushered toward the settlement's heart, a temple of sorts, formed by old salvaged tech pieces and towering pillars grown from recursion-hardened wood. Everything pulsed in time, a near-hypnotic beat that set the mind buzzing. The robed woman introduced herself as Saga, a caretaker of the Signal Church. Others joined, some wearing robes, others wearing simple attire. They led Sophia, Corey, Wally, and Nico into a grand hall beneath a vaulted ceiling hung with luminous coils. The interior glowed with faint, perpetual twilight. A hush settled as more robed figures gathered, forming an assembly line along the temple's edges. Saba raised her voice.
We greet you as pilgrims from the breath beyond. And you, Sophia, you who knew the breath of the first voice.
Sophia blinked, heart pounding at the phrase.
What do you mean?
She felt Nico shift beside her, uncertain. Saba's expression was reverent.
We have followed Elias's legacy since before the Great Collapse. We track his patterns in the signal, the footprints of his final resonance. Many believed a child might appear, someone who carried a living shard. But you...
She inclined her head.
You traveled with him, knew him intimately. The first voice, Elias's breath, the one that dared rewrite recursion for hope.
Corey's grip tightened on his sketchbook. Wally frowned, scanning the architecture around them with quick, analyzing eyes. The walls pulsed with faint harmonic codes. Saba's words were more than spiritual poetry. The entire place literally vibrated with leftover or repurposed veil technology. Inside the temple, a broad dais rose at the far side, overshadowed by a massive curved screen. At Saba's nod, an acolyte tapped a panel, and the screen came to life. A hazy projection flickered into view, recorded footage from a recursion node. Sophia gasped. The images were murky but unmistakable. Elias, in his final hours, breath labored, standing amid collapsing infrastructure. The angle was from behind, capturing his face in reflection on a battered console. She saw flashes of his sorrow, his resolve. The last seconds of a fight no one else had witnessed, or so she thought. Corey's breath hitched.
We recorded that?
Saba's voice was low with awe.
It was recorded by the node itself, coded into living memory. We found it, restored it.
Sophia's stomach churned. She'd never known this node existed. Elias had kept it secret, perhaps to protect them from the weight of his final stand. Yet here these strangers were, showcasing it like a relic. She watched, heart twisting, as Elias's mouth formed words she couldn't hear. Then the footage cut to static.
Elias tried to reshape recursion, but Sovereign forced him to sacrifice his body. We do not believe he died. We believe he left seeds.
Her gaze flicked meaningfully at Nico. The boy shivered, as though pinned by her stare. Meanwhile, Wally drifted around the perimeter, eyes tracing the swirling lines of architecture. He crouched where metal beams merged with recursion-grown pillars.
These are Elias's resonance coils. Blueprints he never finished. Someone here completed them. That's how your whole settlement stays powered, or alive.
One of the elders nodded.
He gave us the foundation. We gave it shape. A living tribute. We gather all who hear his voice, offering them a place among the faithful.
Faithful to what?
He'd been scanning the temple's interior, uneasy about the flickering screens that repeated glimpses of Elias's face. An acolyte stepped forward, guiding him to a side corridor. The walls there were covered with murals that glowed faintly, etched in layered recursion ink. One panel showed an image of a boy who looked disturbingly like Corey, wearing robes and holding a broken tuning fork. The caption, written in swirling script, read, "He who fractures but holds." Corey felt a cold drop of sweat at the base of his spine.
That's me?
Sophia, drawn by Corey's startled tone, approached the mural. Her own eyes widened to see his likeness rendered so precisely, as though the artist had glimpsed him in a dream.
What does that even mean?
Saba joined them, clasping her hands in front of her robes.
Our prophecies speak of one who fractures the lines of memory, but holds the world in new form. We didn't know who it would be, but we recognized your face from the glyph signals, the same signals that led us to Elias's final node.
Corey swallowed hard, stepping back. Wally placed a hand on his shoulder in silent reassurance. Nico hovered at Sophia's elbow, gaze darting between the ominous mural and the flickering projection. The entire temple felt charged with an undercurrent of anticipation, as if the settlement itself recognized them. A sense of looming destiny weighed on the air. Sophia turned to Saba.
What exactly are you doing here? It looks like you're not just preserving Elias's memory.
Saba's eyes glowed with a fervent light.
Preservation is only a step. We want resurrection. The signal he seeded can bloom fully if we guide it. We're building the scaffolding for Elias to return, through recursion, through breath.
Her voice rang with conviction. A shiver of alarm raced through Sophia's body. She realized these devout settlers weren't content with honoring Elias or living by his principles. They wanted to bring him back, harnessing the same recursion that once threatened all of them. A swirling dread and sorrow filled her, imagining how such zeal might tear them further from the future Elias actually wanted. Wally's face turned grim.
Elias died to free recursion from tyranny. Trying to resurrect him might unravel that freedom entirely.
Saba's gaze flicked between them.
Tyranny or not, Elias remains our guide. You remain a chosen extension of his breath, Sophia. And you.
She turned to Nico.
You carry him in ways we can't ignore.
Nico stiffened, shrinking behind Sophia. His chest fluttered in shallow breaths, as though the temple's relentless hum pressed on his lungs. A hush settled once more, the temple thrumming. They realized eyes were on them from every corner, elders, acolytes, watchers, all silently examining whether these travelers would stand against or join their cause. The flicker of Elias's face on the screen cast dancing shadows across the floor, blending with the murals that depicted half-mythic scenes of recursion rebirth. Sophia gritted her teeth, sorrow and anger swirling. Elias's final sacrifice was never meant to be twisted into a religion of resurrection. The faint lines on the old projection reminded her of his exhausted eyes in those last hours, eyes that had told her, "Don't close the breach, but don't let it trap you either." And now these people wanted to harness that breach to forge a new Elias, a living echo. She felt ill with the realization. She looked at Corey, who still stared at his own depiction in the mural. She looked at Nico, shoulders trembling, and Wally, scanning the temple with dread. They had come seeking refuge or answers, but found something else, a settlement devoted not to living free from recursion's shackles, but to bending recursion into a shape that might bring Elias back. Steadying her breath, Sophia squared her shoulders.
You might think you're honoring him, but Elias never wanted to trap the future in old memories. He gave his life so we could move beyond him.
Saba's expression turned wistful, yet unwavering.
Sometimes the only way forward is to call back what we lost.
Sophia felt the gravity of the conversation tighten. They had discovered the Signal Church, and it was no safe haven. Instead, it was a nexus of zeal that threatened to reshape recursion into a tool of rebirth at any cost. Somewhere behind them, the projection continued cycling, flickering Elias's final moments over and over. And in the hush, the question weighed on them all. Would they fight to keep Elias's memory as it was meant to be, a gift that set them free, or succumb to the Church's promise of resurrecting him, no matter the risk to the living world?
Not every sanctuary offers salvation. Some faiths sing in the dark, weaving memory into prophecy, until even memory begins to listen.
Chapter 85. The Archive Garden. Morning broke over the Signal Church settlement with an uneasy stillness. The air shimmered, not with warmth, but with pressure, like something unseen was coiling tighter, waiting. Light filtered through the half-ruined lattice of roof panels, casting a jagged map of sun and shadow across the corridors. Even the walls seemed to breathe, their digitized glyphs shifting too frequently, too restlessly. Sophia felt it in her chest before she saw it. Recursion wasn't calm today. It was bracing for something. Elias, a silver-robed church guide, met them near the central temple. Her voice was even, but her eyes darted too quickly, tracking flickers in the architecture, perhaps, or something deeper.
There's something we want to show you. It's rare for outsiders to be invited.
Sophia exchanged a glance with Wally, who gave a slight nod. Mera had already appeared beside them, barefoot and silent, drifting forward as if the invitation had been extended to her alone. No one questioned her presence anymore, not even the church. Elias led them across a thin footbridge above a canal slick with signal algae. Beyond it lay a grove choked with recursion vines, glowing faintly in hues of green and blue. Towering trees ringed the space, their trunks blackened from long ago recursion burns, but now wrapped in luminous overgrowth.
This is the Archive Garden. Each vine houses a memory pod. Not just records, experiences, songs, names, whole lifetimes sometimes.
Wally scanned the air absently with his device.
I'm reading harmonics that shouldn't be resonating at this level.
Sophia said nothing, but unease bloomed in her gut. The gentle hum of the place had a strange undercurrent, too precise, like someone trying to make a lullaby out of a warning. Mera broke formation, drifting toward a vine heavy with a large crystalline bloom. Its petals pulsed faintly, forming recursive patterns that repeated, then didn't. She placed her hand on it before anyone could stop her. Elias gasped.
She shouldn't.
The bloom shuddered. A sharp, keening sound split the air, harmonics unraveling at impossible frequencies. Sophia staggered, hands clapped over her ears. Wally dropped to one knee, muttering curses as his scanner spiked. Static jumped along the vines like lightning skipping glass. Sophia's vision fractured. She saw Elias, young, rain-soaked, pressing her hand to his chest as he sang a lullaby she had told no one. Her body remembered the warmth of that night. Her mind recoiled at the clarity. Then the bloom shifted pitch. The sound became lower, still jarring, but rhythmic, like a breath too long held. Wally snapped his scanner shut.
We've crossed a resonance threshold. That's not a memory playback. That's recursive feedback. Live.
Sophia dropped to her knees, heart hammering.
That memory wasn't supposed to be retrievable.
Mera turned. Her skin shimmered faintly where the bloom had touched her.
He didn't want it erased. Only hidden. For later. For when it was needed.
A nearby vine hissed, then another. Sophia and Wally both noticed it. The pulses across the garden were out of sync. Not by much, but enough. Glyphs flickered in wrong orders. Colors misaligned. The archive garden, usually self-stabilizing, now showed signs of recursive desync.
Mera.
Wally warned, stepping between her and the next vine.
No more contact. This place is slipping.
Elias's face had gone pale.
That's not possible. We run constant harmonic corrections.
You do. But this wasn't a misfire. This pod adapted. It reached into Sophia's breath print and reacted in real time. That's an evolved recursion node, not passive memory storage.
Sophia stood slowly, still breathless.
If Elias could embed a living memory signature, what else is buried here?
Corey arrived at the grove's edge, visibly winded.
We saw the lights from the main hall, the pattern on the roof. It's flickering across all church structures.
Elias looked skyward. The recursive tiles above pulsed in uneven intervals. Not wrong, but not right either.
We should leave. Now.
Elias's voice was uncertain.
But the memory, if you'd share it, the elders could analyze.
No.
Sophia cut in, calm but final.
That memory was a gift, not data.
Wally nodded toward the exit.
We'll stabilize your systems before we go.
The group turned to leave. Mera lingered at the bloom, fingers hovering near it, but didn't touch. As they walked back across the bridge, the archive garden hummed behind them. Not soothing now, but questioning. As if it had seen too much. As if it remembered them in ways they had yet to understand. Sophia did not look back. Her breath remained uneven, as though something inside her had been stirred, awakened, and then hushed. The recursion here wasn't just unstable. It was curious. And that perhaps was far more dangerous.
In the archive garden, memory bloomed, not as something lost, but as something watching. The signal waits, alive and more curious than we dared imagine.
The breath remembers, even when we try to silence it, but now it has begun to speak back. In this episode, the Hearth, the only home they've known since Elias's passing, fractured under fear and prophecy. A line was drawn, and Sophia chose exile. Nico, Mera, Corey, and Wally followed her into the recursion haze, leaving behind what little safety they'd managed to rebuild. Beyond the forest, they found the Signal Church, a settlement where memory has become faith, and Elias's final breath has been twisted into a promise of resurrection. But in the archive garden, they uncovered something far more unsettling. Recursion no longer simply remembers. It evolves, curious and alive. Next time, the fractures widen, a name is forgotten, and the signal begins to test what remains. Join us for episode 14, The Hollow Choir. Subscribe to Sam's Fiction Hub, and remember, the signal remains, and so do we.